All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody, and happy trade deadline day. We are going to be breaking down in this video just the Kevin Durant to the Suns trade and the couple of deals that the Lakers made, sending out Russell Westbrook and also sending out Thomas Bryant. And then later today at 6 p.m. Eastern, myself and Chris Mannix will be doing a full breakdown of the trade deadline where we will get into every single one of the important deals. Very much looking forward to that. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And then last but not least, if for whatever reason you guys miss one of these videos and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, remember you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. So Kevin Durant is a Phoenix Sun right up the street from me. I'm going to have to get up to see some more Suns games now. They send out Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jae Crowder, 4 first-round picks, and a pick swap for Kevin Durant and TJ Warren. If you guys remember last year, before the playoffs, when the Suns were whooping everybody's ass during the regular season, I had kind of a conversation with you guys about how I was wondering if the NBA was kind of heading in a direction where depth of talent on the roster was more important than top-end talent. My theory was basically like, the game is more spread out now. It's more drive and kick. You need more aggregate offensive talent on the floor because that's how you can extend advantages through drive and kicks by making good reads and beating people off the dribble. So it helps to have 4 guys that can do that kind of thing rather than 1 or 2 otherworldly guys. And what I said was I wasn't sure, and I don't know, but I'm curious to see if this Suns team is like the first team in what will be a new movement of depth of talent versus top-end talent. Well, absolutely not. That could not have been further from the case. They got obliterated by a top-end talent in Luka Doncic, and here they are now flipping all of that depth for Kevin Durant. And honestly, the way I look at it, yes, they gave up a ton of wing depth. Yes, they gave up a ton of foot speed, and we're going to talk about those things here in a little bit. But you get the star first, and you figure out the rest later, kind of like what I was talking about with the Dallas Mavericks getting Kyrie Irving. So what I'd like to do is I want to start by looking at what this looks like foundationally for Phoenix. So this was a Spain pick and roll team. This was a team that would have Devin Booker or Chris Paul, usually Chris Paul, running the original ball screen. They'd have some interchanges that would flow into it, but basically it was DeAndre Ayton coming to set a ball screen for Chris Paul or a dribble handoff for Chris Paul. Chris Paul's coming down off of the screen, and while DeAndre Ayton is rolling to the basket, Devin Booker is coming from under the rim and relocating to the top of the key. And they'll mix it up where Devin Booker will back screen for DeAndre Ayton to try to open up some things for the lob, or maybe DeAndre Ayton deliberately will run his roll right into Devin Booker's defender to try to open up things for Devin Booker at the top of the key. But it basically puts your defense in a blender where they have to make decisions about who to leave open. Now, it gets a little more complicated, which we'll talk about when they get to the postseason, but that's foundationally what their offense looks like. And usually it's Mikal Bridges that's on the backside taking advantage of that extra attention and attacking that closeout and making plays in spot-up situations there. So really, they can go about this a couple of different ways. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant could run the action themselves, or they could run it with Chris Paul and Booker, or Chris Paul and Durant with Booker or Durant on the backside. Both of those guys, all 3 of the guys really are deadly with their pull-up jumper in the mid-range, so you can kind of organize it any way that you want. But because all of those guys are so good with their pull-up jump shot, it brings that screen defender out to try to corral Chris Paul, Devin Booker, KD as they're coming off the ball screen, which opens up things for Ayton, which draws that help defender in to have to deal with that lob threat, which is what opens up that backside for whoever's there, whether that's going to be KD or Devin Booker or Chris Paul. Now, Kevin Durant in particular has been the best pick-and-roll ball handler in the league this year. He's averaging 1.24 points per possession, including passes, which out of 102 players to run at least 200 pick and rolls, he's number 1 in the entire league. Devin Booker and Chris Paul are both also very good. Booker's 1.03 points per possession, which is 41st out of 102 qualifying players, and Chris Paul is 1.5 points per possession, which is 27th out of 102 players. So they've got 3 of the top, 41 pick and roll ball handlers in the league. But there's some redundancy there. So that's the stuff that they're going to have to figure out. Like Chris Paul doesn't make as much sense on the court alongside Kevin Durant and Devin Booker as he does when Kevin Durant's not there, right? So I'd be really curious to see in like crunch time situations or specific playoff matchups if they get Chris Paul off the floor and they bring in like a defensive guard, someone like Damian Lee, who obviously isn't quite the offensive player that Devin Booker or Chris Paul is, not even close, but he's quicker and he's got a little bit more size and he can give you at least some stuff on the defensive end of the floor. And you trust Kevin Durant and Devin Booker to be able to run quality offense. And honestly, the thing that gets tricky is like in the playoffs, teams inevitably kind of figure out how to guard actions. Like we saw this last year. The Suns are blending everybody up with that Spain pick and roll, but then Dallas kind of figures it out. And a lot of this was Maxi Kleber and his ability to switch out onto Chris Paul. So they were able to switch that action, which forced Chris Paul and Devin Booker to start ISOing a lot more. And Chris Paul broke down and Devin Booker's pull-up jump shot fell apart. He just couldn't knock down a pull-up jump shot to save his life down the stretch of that series. So obviously in that situation, Kevin Durant is what makes you invincible offensively. He brings that high level isolation creation that is going to be much more reliable even than Devin Booker. And it's going to give Devin Booker the ability to be more selective about when he ISO so that he can be pickier, better matchups, more lift because he's not as fatigued. It's going to basically make that Phoenix Suns offense that can get bogged down when teams figure out the Spain pick and roll. It can turn them into a team that's going to kill you in isolation anyway. So it basically makes the Phoenix offense completely and totally unguardable. And, the Chris Paul element, like I said, it might not make sense to play him in crunch time groupings because they need to kind of prioritize defense and, his offense is a little redundant there. But it's a depth of shot creation. Now, when you're in the early second quarter and KD's on the bench because he played the entire first quarter, it's like, lucky you get Chris Paul and Devin Booker for that entire shift. You know what I mean? Like, it's always going to be two of those guys that are on the floor at the same time. So, like, Phoenix's offense is going to be literally insanely good. And I'm so excited to watch them. I might have to get up to Phoenix to check out some games this year. Now, the defense in particular, I'm a little concerned about specific matchups, particularly drive and kick teams with speed, like really quick players like Jordan Poole or De'Aaron Fox from the Warriors or the Kings. When you look at their groupings, like DeAndre Ayton is capable of being a very good defensive player, but he's a little bit finicky and he's a little bit hot and cold with his effort, right? Kevin Durant is an outstanding defensive player. Once again, it's related to effort. But the thing with Kevin Durant in particular, he's a defender that impacts games with length, especially around the rim. But you can beat Kevin Durant off the dribble with strength and with speed because he's got a high center of gravity. He's thin and he doesn't move laterally super well. So there's some issues there. Devin Booker has turned himself into a good defensive player. Not a great defensive player, but a good defensive player. And Chris Paul at this age is a little bit slower, not as good with the quicker players around the league. So you've got four guys there that are going to struggle with foot speed. So specifically teams that are extremely fast, that do a lot of driving and kicking, are going to be able to get good stuff against Phoenix's defense. Then you've got that 3 spot. I don't think you could put TJ Warren there because he's not quick enough. I don't think you could put Torrey Craig there because he's not quick enough. It's probably going to be a situation where they want to have a point of attack defender there. I wouldn't be surprised if they considered starting Damian Lee there because he brings that foot speed and that quickness and that ability to guard on the perimeter. But then that brings this issue where it's like I've got a 6-foot guard, a 6'5" guard, and a 6'5" guard as my back three position. So it makes you a little bit smaller. Now that puts more on Kevin Durant and DeAndre Ayton to hang up in the physical areas of the game. So it's going to be interesting to see how they round things out. I wouldn't be surprised if they attempt to make another deal for a wing. Like, I don't think you can slot Torrey Craig in there either because he's that big forward that does better with size and physicality than he does with quickness and speed. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. They're going to have to figure some stuff out defensively, but the ultra high offensive ceiling is entirely worth it every single time. And if Kevin Durant and DeAndre Ayton really lock in on the defensive end of the floor, they should be able to clean a lot of stuff up. So I'm excited. We're going to talk a ton more about the Phoenix Suns here in the next couple of months. The Brooklyn Nets, now you get to reset. You get to build a basketball culture that extends beyond the egos of your stars. And I'm not talking as much about Kevin Durant there as I am about Kyrie Irving, but you were beholden to that partnership. then now you no longer are. And you have tons of picks and you have interesting young players. You're going to be able to give Mikal Bridges the ball for the rest of the season and all of next season and really find out what he's capable of as a shot creator. Because if he can figure out how to get that shot creation stuff with what he does defensively, he can become your next Paul George in this league, that wiry, thin, but super athletic skill two-way wing. And that's what you're hoping. It's a flyer on Mikal. Hasn't done amazing. He's done better this season, but he hasn't done amazing in the last few years when they've needed him to create shots. But now you get to find out. And honestly, the best way to work on that stuff is just a shit ton of reps, and that's what he's going to get in Brooklyn now. One last note here. Kyrie Irving. I am genuinely impressed. This is the first time I have ever seen a bona fide championship contending team get blown up in the middle of the season. I think he's probably the only guy in the world who could do something like that. And, it's kind of an interesting accomplishment, to say the least. Although I'm looking forward to watching him in Dallas as well. All right, moving on to the Lakers. So they get D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, and Devon Reed for Russell Westbrook, Thomas Bryant, and a lightly protected first-round pick. Now, what I want to do is I want to look at this from three angles. What does this deal accomplish for this team? I want to talk about whether it was worth the wait, although we'll probably get into that with Chris Mannix because I do want to see if the Lakers make another deal here before the deadline. And then I want to take a brief look back at the Russell Westbrook experience. So, first of all, what these deals accomplish. What have I been saying all season long about what the Lakers need? I've said they've needed wing depth, which they've addressed, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I also said they desperately needed backcourt offensive skill. You look at that Thunder game as you're watching Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Josh Giddey just absolutely barbecue Dennis Schroeder and Patrick Beverley. And then on the other end of the floor, they are incapable of recuperating that on the offensive end because they're not very skilled offensive guards. And so they bring two skilled offensive guards in to address that. D'Angelo Russell is one of my least favorite skill guards in the league. Like, he's kind of inconsistent, although he's having a better season this year. Not a great defensive player. He's a little bit of a sketchy late game decision maker. I thought that hurt the Wolves a lot in the playoffs last year. Kind of lacks self-awareness, and it's kind of like a, it's D'Lo time kind of dude. The Wolves this season have been 5 points better per 100 possessions with D'Lo on the bench versus when he's on the floor. So he's not my favorite. That said, the backcourt is so utterly devoid of skill that it's going to feel like a breath of fresh air for the Lakers anyway. He brings that pull-up jump shooting that I talk so much about. He's 43% on pull-up jumpers this year, 53% if you weight it for threes. He's an excellent creator in pick and roll. The Wolves have scored 714 points on 682 pick and rolls this year, including passes when D'Angelo Russell has the ball. That's 17th out of 39 players to run at least 500. So it's not great or anything, but that's a really solid pick and roll shot creator. And he's been really good in isolations this year, averaging 1.29 points per possession. That's best in the entire league out of 87 players who have run at least 50 of them. So he's having an outstanding isolation season as well. I do worry about him a little bit in the playoffs because his release is like down in front of his face a little bit. And specifically with that type of release, you have to get tons of separation because really, really good defensive players are going to be able to bother that shot with length more than a player that has a higher release point or elevates more in a shot. D'Lo's a little bit more of a set shooter, and he shoots down in front of his face, so he needs that separation. So during a regular season, when he's getting more separation, it's one thing, but in a playoff series, the other team's going to put an outstanding point of attack defender on him and really bother that pull-up jump shot. So once again, not my favorite skill guard in the league, but fit matters almost as much as talent, and the Lakers so desperately need somebody in that position that I think D'Lo's really, really going to help them. And again, LeBron brings that high-level shot making over the top of the defense, and in smaller doses when he doesn't have to carry that entire load, he should be really effective there. And D'Lo's capable of getting hot and changing games in a way that no Laker has been. You saw that Warriors game the other night when he just got insanely hot with his pull-up three in the early fourth quarter, and suddenly a game the Warriors were going to win by double digits turned into an overtime battle that the Warriors lost. That's something that the Lakers just simply have not had in the last couple of seasons. So it's going to help them quite a bit. Malik Beasley is that movement and spot-up shooter that doesn't exist on the roster. Not having a great season. He's only 36% on catch-and-shoot jumpers, 39% on dribble jumpers on pretty decent volume, so that's pretty good. So he's been better off the dribble than he has been off the catch, but only 0.99 points per spot-up possession, which is below what you'd hope for a player like him. But he was in a pretty significant role in Utah. He had to take a lot of shots. Like, he was attempting 12 shots per game, and getting just 13 points on him, he's going to be able to be much more selective in a smaller role. They're not going to need him to force things up, and he's going to get a lot better opportunities just because of the way that teams load up on LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So he's going to get to be more selective. He's going to have better opportunities. I think he's actually going to bring a lot of help for the Lakers on the wing there. Kind of a bench guy, but I could see in specific matchups him playing the two guard and closing groups when it works. Not a great defensive player, but he's a great athlete. And LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the back line buy you a lot of opportunity to simplify offensive roles when those two guys are locked in, which they should be able to do now since they brought in some offensive skill to lighten their offensive workload. So now you can go to Malik Beasley and be like, dude, I don't need you to be a defensive wing stopper, but I need you to chase guys over screens. I need you to funnel them into the basket. I need you to play a role. And if you can do this and rotate back out of it by working hard and helping on the defensive glass, then we can turn you into an average defensive player, which will make your offensive ceiling so much more valuable to this team. And then lastly, Jared Vanderbilt. He's one of my favorite players in the league, actually, like a much better version of Wenyen Gabriel for you Laker fans to kind of get an idea of the kind of way that he plays. He's an outstanding rebounder. He's averaging 12 rebounds per 36 minutes, 4 offensive rebounds per 36 minutes, and he's an outstanding defensive player, a big forward, kind of like I always talk about that like thinner, wiry forward and the bigger, stronger forward. He's that big, strong forward that's quick enough to guard some wings too, and he can play some backup center alongside LeBron James in specific matchups, although the intel is that the Lakers will be looking for a bigger backup center as well. On offense, he's pretty limited to being like a dunker spot guy or like a pick and roll man type of guy, but that's more or less what Wenyen Gabriel's doing right now anyway. And for a bench big, that's totally fine. You're not expecting Jared Vanderbilt to close games for you. And then they flipped Thomas Bryant for Devon Reed. Thomas Bryant I really liked, and he played really hard, and he had a great season for the Lakers, but the reality was he's so bad defensively, he was not going to be able to play in the playoffs. He's another Montrezl Harrell type of player. So getting him off the roster will make it so that Darvin Ham, who's had serious issues with his rotation decisions this year, it'll make it so that he can't play Thomas Bryant in those situations, which will really help. Devon Reed's like another 6'5" wing who's a little bit limited offensively by the numbers, but I haven't had a chance to watch much tape about how he looks defensively. I'd like to do that in the coming weeks, but honestly, I don't think he's going to play much just because of how deep the Lakers are now at the guards and on the wing. But most importantly, it frees up minutes by getting Thomas Bryant out of there for Wenyen Gabriel and for Jared Vanderbilt. Looking back at the deals, they've massively improved in their backcourt skill, which they needed to do, and they've added a shit ton of backcourt or front court depth with Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt. Now, I do like the deal, but I have an opinion on the totality of this trade deadline that I want to save for after the deadline actually happens, because I do think the Lakers need to make one more deal to justify waiting this long, digging themselves in a 25-30 hole, 4 games out of getting out of the play-in and 2 games out of the play-in in general. So they need to justify waiting this long and digging this type of hole. So I want to wait to have that total opinion until after the deadline. We will talk about that with Chris Mannix at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then lastly, with Russell Westbrook, this is all I want to say. I am a basketball fan to my core, as you guys know. And the one team that I really root for a lot of teams because I like players, but like LeBron James is my favorite player. We talked about this after he broke the scoring record the other day. So I root for the Lakers as my quote-unquote favorite team, even though I'm not necessarily a Lakers fan. And rooting for Russell Westbrook was a chore because of the fact that at this phase in his career, with his athletic decline, the up and down nature of his game kind of tilted to the point where the negatives outweighed the positives. And I was really frustrated with the way the Lakers used him, especially in clutch situations. And over the last couple of years, those of you guys who have followed this show have heard me relentlessly criticize Russell Westbrook. But a couple different things. First of all, it's genuinely authentic. As a fan of the game, that was just the way I felt watching him play. That type of player has always been kind of like quote unquote offensive to me as a basketball fan. So I really struggled with that. But 2, it wasn't opportunistic. Nobody cares about Russell Westbrook slander. That's never been what has made this show work. I never did it just for clicks or for attention. It was genuinely authentic basketball analysis. I was frustrated as hell watching and rooting for that guy, okay? But lastly, I am happy that he is gone so that he can go into a different basketball situation that makes more sense for him with all of his flaws, his one primary strength is driving and kicking right now with rim pressure to shooters, and the Lakers are the worst possible team for him to be in there. There's intel that he might be going to the Clippers. That's going to be a much better basketball fit for him because the Clippers are one of the best jump shooting teams in the league. He's going to be great for them, I think, in a bench role in the middle portions of the game, as long as they don't keep him on the court in crunch time alongside Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So I'm rooting for Russ. I genuinely am, to have a better situation where he can be more impactful. And most importantly, regardless of what I said about him over the years, you guys know I have so much respect for NBA players. And Russell Westbrook just isn't an NBA player. He's one of the best NBA players of all time. He's in, top 100 NBA players of all time, right? Won an MVP, relentless, statistical production over a decade. The dude, I want to be clear, regardless of what the fit was like with the Lakers and how much he struggled there and how happy I am that he's not going to be on that team anymore, I have the utmost respect for Russell Westbrook and what he's accomplished in this NBA. I believe he is a genuinely good person, a great person off the court. All indications are that people love the guy in those situations. I want people to know that I do not dislike Russell Westbrook. I will be rooting for him with the Clippers, and I have the utmost respect for him and what he's accomplished in this league. It was just authentic reaction to his bad fit with the Lakers and how I thought it was hurting the team. And I hope you guys take me at my word when I say that. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. We will be back tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern with Chris Mannix to break down the deadline. As always, I appreciate your support, and I'll see you in a couple hours.